After that.
Make sure you see the...
Now it says live.
Only when you see thumbs coming up do you know it's actually working.
There's no thumb.
It says
There,
live.
yeah, but there's
No, it's
thumb.
not there yet because
There should be a thumb here. You know how you like? Should be, normally it's there.
It's probably not working.
No, it's not there.
We had the same problem as last time. Maybe just hit end.
Rega.
It's just like...
Just hit
Was
end.
this there before?
yeah, that's normally there to say... Oh,
Hit
Oh,
end.
here we go.
There.
Now we're going.
We're building an audience.
Yeah, your thumb, with thumb coming across.
Thumb is coming across?
Yeah,
Okay,
but
that must
it's
be
not
live then.
there, like how it normally is there. I don't know.
Want to look on your phone to see if it's live?
Oh, there's a thumb. And
There's a thumb?
Michelle Khan joined.
All right, so she's in. Welcome, Michelle. All right, we're on page 80 in the English Hebrew version. 80 and 79 in the English, 48 in the Hebrew. All right? Now we're on the bottom half of the page. And the Alter Rebbe, after spending a lot of time explaining to us the range of possibilities within our Jewish genome, the spiritual genetics, and where we might come from, where our sources. So the Alter Rebbe ultimately attributes the source of everything, the beginning, the first glimmer, back to the concept of Chachma. And Chachma, we said, is a state of bittul, a state of self-abnegation, because ideas come from nowhere. So it seems. We explained this in great detail. So the Alter Rebbe, in last week's class, we talked about the idea that wherever you have the concept of Kedusha, you have the concept of bittul. So simply stated, the more it's about ego, or the more it's about I, the less it's about God. Our sages say that God says, with regard to one who is afflicted with the illness called egoism, Ein ani v'hu yechelim l'odor. There's no room for the two of us. I can't live there. If the place is full of he, then there's no room for me. So the concept of filling with space, with focus on self, necessarily gets in the way of allowing God into your life. So why is this? This is like a vindictiveness. God says, I don't want you to be an egomaniac, but if you are an egomaniac, I don't want to have anything to do with you. You have to understand that the notion of us being independent, us feeling a sense of independence, necessarily comes from the tzimtzum, from the concealment. Because if we would feel and know the presence of God without the tzimtzum, we would not be able to have the freedom of choice. We wouldn't feel independent or separate at all. We would feel as part of something much greater. We would feel our continuous dependency upon God. We would feel as we are an extension from the reality of divinity. So in order for us to feel a sense of independence, which necessarily allows for the freedom of choice, God conceals himself. So God is enabling everything to exist, but we don't see it. We don't feel it. We feel that we exist. We don't see God's existence. So if a person is able to get past that, then he opens new spiritual endorphins to the truth, which is divinity, which is godliness. And if he allows God into his life, because he's not obsessed about it with himself, so then he has a relationship, a closeness to Hashem. And since God is life, the source of life, so as such, a person then has a connection to the concept of God and life. But if one focuses entirely on themselves, then they disable or block the light or energy of divinity from coming into their life. The simple example, which can be seen within the framework of a human body, is that when the limbs do not feel themselves as independent, when there's a part of the body that no part of the body feels itself as separate, it doesn't have pain, it doesn't express itself, it doesn't demand attention, then you know that the person's in a state of perfect health, that everything is working in tandem, and the entire body ultimately is nullified or committed or connected or loyal to the spiritual energy, to life that enables it. But when you have a part of the body that makes a declaration of independence and informs you that it is no longer going to serve the function that you want it to serve or that the rest of the body wants it to serve, and it lets you know loudly with its pain, or maybe it's becomes disfigured, it becomes swollen, but it expresses itself. That's not a sign of health. You don't say, oh, Baruch Hashem, I'm so happy that this part of my body now is expressing itself, is independent, that it feels itself, that it needs special attention. When that happens, then there's a problem. There's a problem. And when the less the body feels a connection to the other parts of the body, the less healthy that part of the body is. And when the bad part of the body stops being connected to the rest of the body altogether, God forbid, that's called gangrene. And then that part of the body is lost. So this is a metaphor for the idea that when a Yid is in a state of bittul, when a Yid is in a state of closeness to Hashem, so when there's closeness, then there's a natural flow of divine energy. But when there's a blockage or obstruction because there's obsessive and compulsive focus on self, then that disables the energy of divinity from reaching and from flowing through the spiritual veins of a person. Does it kind of make sense? So this is a paraphrasing of what Alter Rebbe said. Whenever we have Kol Davar Shebekdusha, always has this concept of bittul, and the opposite is true of that which is unholy. Unholiness is the reality that is ungodly, that does not allow God in, and unholiness is characterized with this business of hav and haliteni, which are expressions ultimately to come back to biblical sources, like in the book of Mishlei, where we have this description of the aluka, the bloodsucker, who says, hav, just gimme, what's in it for me? Or Esav, who comes to Yaakov and he wants some red lentil soup and he says, haliteni, load me up, gimme. In other words, that there is the sense of self-awareness, profound self-awareness, obsessive focus on self-awareness. And the big question is, what's in it for me? What's in it for me? So that's klipa, that's sitra achra. That's what goes against the concept of divinity and godliness. Now here we get into a very interesting place. Because generally speaking, when we speak of holiness, if you have to draw a picture of holiness, today we have these emoticons for everything. It's funny how we're going back 4,000 years. Once upon a time, people used to speak in hieroglyphic, and now we're going back to hieroglyphic. I remember as a kid thinking how ridiculous this is. Why was people in pictures if they could use words? And yet, how often do we respond to a Facebook message or a WhatsApp or a text message with a smile, or with a thumbs up, or with a heart, or a broken heart, or hands clapping? It's unbelievable. It's like we've gone 4,000 years. We came back to where we started. So if you had to draw an emoticon of holiness, what would a holiness look like? As like a soul, what would a soul look like? Okay, so people have these silly images of a soul, something with like, an angel maybe, little wings, somebody looking nice and pretty and sweet and giving. What would a holiness look like? I don't know. Holiness, certainly if it was Jewish emoticons, it would look like a talis, a tefillin, a Shabbos candles, challah. I don't know. It would look something Jewish, a mitzvah artifact. That's holiness, because that's what God wants. So if somebody wants to draw a picture of holiness, draw a picture of how the world's supposed to look when people are living in tandem or accordance with the will of God. So is it possible to have holiness in a totally unholy fashion? Is it possible to do mitzvahs in a way which is the polar opposite of connection to God? Most definitely yes. You say how? Very simple. If a person does mitzvahs and he's motivated entirely by selfishness, is that an act of subservience or an act of arrogance? If a person is going to follow not his nefesh alikis, not his godly soul, but he's following his animal soul, because the animal soul is all about me. The godly soul is all about God. And somebody said, what God wants is, what is it God wants? Is it something in it for me? Do I get something from it? No? Well, then what am I doing it for? So then the source of it is all about ego. And it could be that something looks very holy on the surface, but actually it isn't. And that's why the Gemara says that somebody could learn Torah, and not only it doesn't become a life elixir, it becomes a toxic poison. How could it be a poison? If a person is learning Torah only for the purpose of self-aggrandizement, only so that he should be respected, that he should be given a sense of dignity from others, that he should feel good about himself, that's why he's learning Torah. It's all about me. And if he's not going to get respected, and he's not going to get appreciated, and he's not going to feel a sense of enhanced ego or dignity, he has no interest. Leave me alone. I'm not doing this. Is that an act of holiness?
But it might turn around, isn't it?
Yeah, it might turn around. That's the Gemara actually asks that question. So what should we do? Tell him not to? So the Gemara says no. La'olam, really, in truth and forever, Yasek Adam, a person should engage himself, Shalei Lishma, for the wrong reasons. Why? Out of doing it for the wrong reasons, you come to the right reasons. And the Hasidic interpretation that Rebbe would always quote is mitoich, deep, deep down under all the layers of ego and arrogance and selfishness, there's ultimately a little bit of selflessness. There's still the holy neshama that's functioning somewhere deep down in the subconsciousness. That's true. Of course that's true. But the reality is, on a superficial level, that would be a picture of arrogance, of ego, of klipa, not of holiness. Not of holiness. So really we have to go back to the source. Back to the source of everything. Why is somebody doing it? This is a frightening thought. It could be a lot of our mitzvahs are being done for all the wrong reasons. There's a famous story told in the shtetl days of this young man who married well, and the reason that his wealthy family was interested because he was supposed to be a scholar, but really he was not much of a scholar, and he didn't enjoy Torah study at all. He couldn't wait to get into business, but that's how he got into this family. That's how he made the shidduch. So he's got to learn. Okay, he's got to learn. So he's like daydreaming, and then he hears somebody at the door. So right away he starts to study. They're coming to check on him to see, because they're spending money supporting him. So he learns, and he's learning, and every time he hears some scratching at the door, he began to learn with great fervor. And he spent most of his time studying, because apparently they're always checking up on him. A year elapses, and he finds out, by chance, that the scratching at the door was the local cat, the family cat. They say a whole year he learned Torah for the cat. Now, certainly better than not studying Torah, but Ve'yizmir. He was motivated by the cat and the fear of his mother-in-law. He thought it was mother-in-law, he found out it was the cat. Okay. So this is a klal, this is a rule in the opposite of holiness in Sitra Achra. That's where the non-Jewish approach comes from. The non-Jewish approach is what's in it for me. Hav, haliteni. Which is Hepech, the polar opposite of Bechinas HaChochma, of the level of wisdom. Because wisdom means bittul. That's the nature of wisdom. Therefore, says the Alter Rebbe, Nikroyim Mesim. Oh, now this gets very interesting. So if we have this idea, that's everything of Sitra de Kedusha, is the concept of pure holiness. And that's the idea. Pure holiness means pure bittul. And when there's no bittul, it's the opposite of holiness. So he says, V'lachein nikrayim mesim. That's why they're called dead. Why are they called dead? Because dead means that which is disconnected from divinity. God is the source of life. So if somebody feels self entirely, he doesn't feel any divinity, any godliness, so in that case, he's cut off from the source of life. Uksiv, and it says in the book of Koheles that HaChochma Techaya, that the Chochma, that's what gives life, so to speak. That's where life comes from. On a literal level, you could read it, guys has to be smart enough to make a living, but that's not what it means on a mystical level. On a mystical level, HaChochma Techaya, the concept of Chochma, that's what gives life. And it says Yomusu, in the book of Eov it says, they may die, however, v'lei b'chochma, not with wisdom. Because if they're connected to Chochma, it's impossible to have this concept of death or disconnection from Hashem. Now, of course, we're not speaking about terrestrial life. We're speaking about Chaim Amitim. We're talking about true life. What is the difference in true life and what we would call false life? Well, very simple. The Mishnah defines truth as that which is unchanging. So all the styles are necessarily not true. Politics is not true. None of this is all sheker. Why? Because it changes. Swings this way, swings that way. It's not truth. The societal norms or the mores of a particular culture or civilization are ever changing. They swing one way, they swing the other way. They call themselves progressive, they're actually regressive. Everything that was has been already. But it gets boring. People can't have the same thing. You could have a great prime minister who's providing the people with everything they need, and people throw him out on his head. Why? They've taken a total idiot, a nincompoop, a person who bankrupts the country. We need a change. We just needed some change. Well, really, why do you need change exactly? What was wrong with the wheel? The wheel was working. Why do you have to fix it? No, actually, I don't know. Explain it to me. Please explain to me what you needed to change for. What you needed it for? You needed a change from an economy that was working to an economy that didn't work. What was the point? But that's how people are. Human existence is all about change, because people are fickle, and people want to be entertained, and people have to be, especially in today's iPhone generation, they say if the video is more than 30 seconds, you lost everybody's attention already. Next, move on to the next thing. The idea of studying, of immersing yourself in a text, of toiling over something for 2-3 hours, it's almost unheard of. I spoke to a great Rosh Hashiva, my Rosh Hashiva from Los Angeles a few years ago. And I said to him, how do you find the boys today? Do you find the difference, like from my days and today? I said, I see this amazing things. Young students, they have this passion and fervor for Chassidus. They never saw the Rebbe. He said to me, it's true, but on the learning, he said, the computers have destroyed people's head. And he said he sees it. He says people can't focus. He says they can't focus for the times. Even a short 25 years later, I see a difference. He says it drives me crazy. But we're paying a big price with all this technology. Bottom line, things which are when human nature is left unchecked, not harnessed, when people don't push themselves to do things, then they want it quick, they want it fast, they want it changes. That's human nature, always ever changing. Show me something I didn't see before. Show me something different. Otherwise, I'm bored. So that's human nature, and human nature is not necessarily a true thing. What does it mean that's not true? It means it's not lasting. The difference between true love and just a superficial attraction is the superficial attraction is here now and gone later. But true love is something that stays, even when the very things that attracted you to begin with no longer exist. When it's true love, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what changes because there's true love there. So parents will always love their children, even when the children behave horribly. Sometimes the love won't manifest itself in the way of love. It'll manifest itself in the form of frustration or even grief. But what is it? What's the source of it? The source of it is the connection. The connection can't be broken because it's true. So the Mishnah says that we have something called Mayim HaMechazvim, waters of deceit. And so when it comes to certain ritual that requires water, so the water has to come from a true source. And obviously the Mishnah's question is, what do you mean a true source? What's false water? Virtual reality water? Water is water. H2O, it's wet, it's cold. What's the difference? So he says, no. And the source has to be a true source, meaning if it's a wadi where there's flash floods, especially in Israel, and you have sometimes a raging river, and 3 years later there's nothing left. And then a few years later again it's a river, that's not a true source. And the expression of the Mishnah is from a legal frame. He says if it dries up once every 7 years, then it's not the real deal. If it's real, then it's always going to be there. That's the nature of that which is different between that which is temporal and that which is real. Let's talk about real life. And it's very telling and compelling that there's 2 parshiot in the Torah that are both called life. 2 parshiot, both in the book of Genesis. The first is about a great woman, the second is about a great man. The great woman, of course, is Sarah, and in the parsha she's not alive anymore. And it's called Chaya Sarah. And everything in the parsha is about Sarah's absence. Why does Avraham Avinu have to purchase a piece of land in Israel? Because you can't rent graves. So he's forced. He finally has to purchase. That's only because Sarah died. Sarah was always pushing him all along, but now he finally had to do it. And then Yitzchak needs a wife. And then Avraham marries another woman. All these things could only happen when Sarah is gone. And yet the parsha is called Chaya Sarah. What an oxymoron. And then yesterday's parsha, Vayechi Yaakov, it's all about his death. He's preparing to die. He's making the funeral arrangements. He's giving blessings. He's giving rebuke and criticism. He's doing everything that has to be done. The very tail end of the parsha is about the people in the post-mortem. Now that he's dead, what will Joseph do to us, they said. Now that Yaakov's not here, what will be? He promises him, I'll take care of you. And the very last few verses of the parsha talk about Joseph, but that's it. So it's all about Yaakov's death. It's called Vayechi. You think it's a little strange? The 2 parshiot in the entire Torah, in the Gan Sidra, in the 53 orders of the parshiot, only 2 are called life, and both of them are about death. But that's the point. The point that's being made here is, like Rashi says in yesterday's Torah portion, quoting the Gemara in Tainus, Mazare b'chaim afu b'chaim. As he is alive, his children are alive, which means that when we talk about real tzaddikim, their life goes far beyond the terrestrial reality. In fact, the terrestrial reality is but superficial. That's symptomatic of a level of their life, of the dimension of life. It's visible for others, but the life of a tzaddik goes on for eternity. And the Torah wants to convey that message to us, not once, but twice in the book of Genesis. First with Sarah Imenu, telling us about Chaya Sarah, that Sarah lives on. Why does it mean Sarah lives on? Because Sarah's legacy was that Yitzchak would be the one to inherit everything. That he got rid of Yishmael, and now Sarah's gone, and Avraham marries another woman, and yet he does exactly what his wife told him to do. But she's not alive anymore. And she hasn't been alive for quite some time, for decades. And yet, Avraham does exactly what Sarah said. During her lifetime, he argued with her. In her postmortem of her lifetime, he does everything exactly as she wanted it. Why? Because she was even more powerful after her terrestrial life. She was even more powerful. Even when there was somebody else sleeping in her bed. She was more powerful. Her presence was even more profound. And Yaakov Avinu, he says Yaakov could devote his life to a certain ethos, to an ideology, and then the ideology will die with him, as most ideologies die with the people who started them, or become relegated to secondary importance because their founder, their creator is not breathing new life into them. But here, Yaakov Avinu's ideology, if you will, or what he devoted his life to, continues to live. So Yosef continues to provide for his brothers. As the brothers said to him, he said, now that the father's dead, Yosef said, so what? So our father's terrestrially dead. You think his God is dead? And his ideas live on. So everything Yaakov represented live on. The Torah is trying to convey to us the meaning of life. Meaning of life is not flesh. Meaning of life is not plasma. Meaning of life is spirit. And this concept of spirit is only possible to access it when you're in a state of bittul. But when you have an obsessive and excessive focus on flesh, on material, terrestrial reality, you're cutting yourself off from true life. So that's the message of the Parshas. And that's really a primal truth in the Torah. And the truth, that truism is that you're musu, but lei b'chachma. When you're, as we're explaining it now, when you're connected to the level of chachma, it's impossible, so to speak, to be dead. Which brings us, of course, to the next issue. So what about the wicked Jews? And there are so many of them, unfortunately. What about people who have absolutely no connection to the Yiddishkeit? They live in a state of continuous rebellion against God. Or sometimes they're not even agnostic, they're apathetic. It means nothing to them. It has absolutely no bearing on the way they live their life. It doesn't inform their eating habits, doesn't inform their work and play, nothing, everything wrong. Everything is a rebellion to God. So where's their chachma? That's life. So the truth is, the wicked are the walking dead. That's the truth. The walking dead because of Chen HaRishayim, the wicked Jews, or Poshei Yisrael, the Jews who are immersed in sin. They're also called dead. They're called dead. Why are they called dead? Because they're cut off from the Yiddishkeit. So everything they live for, once their body is gone, everything they live for is gone. Because their whole life was about the physical material reality. And once the physical materiality ends, it's over. You come to a guy and say, your dad used to do this and this. That's his problem. You should go golfing. Why? Because your dad loved golf. No, okay, so let him play golf in heaven. What do you want from me? There's no golf in heaven. What are you talking about? It's ridiculous. It's like saying there's chocolate cake in heaven. This is narishkeit. So, I'm not going to play golf because he played golf. I couldn't care. That's irrelevant to me. You come and say, your dad, you love roast beef. Okay, so what do you want from me? I don't. I like sushi. Your mother, she was so committed to going shopping every Tuesday. You should go shopping. Well, I don't care. I don't like going shopping. I don't want to go shopping ever. When you come to a Yid and say to him, your father and mother, Yiddishkeit meant the world to them. The person says, really, Mamash, meant the world to them? I see this happen all the time. People say, shh, if it meant the world to them, I better up my game. I really have to get involved in Yiddishkeit because it meant the world to them. Because it was important to them. So in other words, the one thing that they lived with, which continues on, is the Yiddishkeit that they had. The spirituality. Other than that, everything else dies, goes into the grave. It's finished. And this is the idea of Rishayim and Poshei Yisrael. So they're the walking dead. But, and there's a big but here. This is all koidem shabo lidei nisoyin l'kiddush Hashem, l'kadosh Hashem. This is before they come to a test which would be one that would marshal every ounce of spiritual wherewithal. Suddenly, when it comes to the big moment of will I sanctify God's name or not, meaning will I disconnect myself from God, from Judaism, from all the traditions, will I cut myself off, ignore it, turn my back on it and move on, or will I say no, okay, that's too much already. That I didn't say I'm not Jewish, I didn't say I'm not one of course I am. And that's the idea of an Nisayon. Only sometimes through a test do we reveal the true inner metal and spiritual courage that a person has. So, Poshei Yisrael are called Mason. Zu gesund. They're called Mason, they're called dead. When are they called dead? They're called dead when they're living a dead life. But the moment they come back to life, it's unbelievable. Full resuscitation. All of a sudden they're alive again. So Poshei Yisrael can actually become, so to speak, filled with life. How does that happen? He just said before that the Peishi Yisrael is called dead, and he's the walking dead. It looks like he's alive, but his life is here today, gone tomorrow. And how does that work with the idea that every single Yid always has a Ava Mesoteres, a hidden love, a latent love? How does that work? How does it go together? So the Alter Rebbe explains, Ki bechinas hachachma shebenefesh olekis. What happens is the level of chachma, we like to call it the pintel Yid. It's a euphemism. It just means that there's a dot, a nuclear essence of Jewishness. It cannot be erased. It's that pintel Yid, that nitzah alikus. Me'oid and seiv baruch hu, from the infinitude, or infinite energy of divinity. Melubish ba, hem bebechinas galus begufam. It's in a state of exile in their body, in the nefesh habahamis, in the animal soul, which all comes mitzad haklipa, that comes because of the husk-like reality of this world, where things are created for extraneous purposes. It's only the husk is created so that it be removed. The shell is supposed to be taken away. The peel has to be, so to speak, cut away. And only after all this is taken away, then you have the fruit itself. Then you have the purpose itself. So if you focus on the packaging, then you miss the point. Miss the point. You know, today the toy companies, they market to grandparents. They don't market to children anymore. Why? Because children can't buy themselves toys. Who buys the toys? The Rabbi and Zaidi buy the toys. So there's this funny cartoon where the grandparents are playing with the toy, and the child is playing with the package. The package looks nice to the kid, and it's a great package. He's busy playing with the wrapper. And they're playing. Listen, look at this. He said, hey, Sammy, look at this lights. Look at this. Sammy's looking at what you're talking about. This. He's too small. He doesn't understand it. It doesn't mean anything. Look, it's just like in the Star Trek movie. He doesn't see the Star Trek movie. He's 3 years old. What do you want from him? He knows the packaging is very shiny. So he likes shiny things. He's holding the package. And that's what life's like for a lot of us. We get focused on the package. We sit in delight in the wrapper. We're so excited with the wrapper. And we miss the point. The wrapper was just delivering a payload. For heaven's sake, like, what is life about? Immature, foolish. So what happens then is that the Chachma is in a state of galus. When the Chachma is in a state of galus, so we don't feel the Chachma. We don't know from the Chachma. We don't focus on the Chachma. What do we focus on? On the Klippa, on the extraneous reality, on the Nefesh Habahamis, on the animal soul, which is Meleches u'Moisheles begufam. Very important words here. What's galus? Galus means when there's a foreign entity that's controlling you. You are not in control anymore. This foreign entity is going to dictate to you how things will be. You're a prisoner of war. Imagine there's a general, a high-ranking officer, and he's captured in battle. He's captured in battle, so he doesn't lose his position as high-ranking officer in the eyes of the enemy. He's now being controlled. They want this prisoner. They say, take care of this guy. Don't kill him. He's full of information. We need to pump him. We need to get him to give us information without even realizing that he's giving us information about how that army works, because the more information we have from him, the more we can create a strategy, and we have what's called counterinsurgency. We have to, so they take this guy, and not only he's not a nobody, here he was in the highest rank and everybody was saluting him, and now he's wearing an orange suit, and he's got numbers. He's got just a dog tag that he's identified by, and he's treated like an animal. He has the bare minimum of life, just being able. It's a prisoner of war. So, but he was a general. He's a 4-star general. Everybody was saluting him, and now he's a nobody. And that's worse than that. They have his number, and while they treat him like an animal, they're busy in brilliant ways. It's professionals who know how to break a person or extract information without the person even knowing. And they're busy extrapolating all kinds of things from this person so that they should be able to fight his own army, his own country. That's called galus. That's called galus. And you have to be exceptionally strong and brilliant to be able to not give the secrets away when you're in that situation. There was many Hasidim where they were captured for their counter-revolutionary activities of Yiddishkeit in the former Soviet Union. So the KGB did all kinds of things to break them, and they wanted to give them information. I was speaking to a friend of mine, and he told me that when his father was taken into custody and starved and beaten and tortured, and they wanted to find the names. Who are the names of the other Hasidim? So they started saying, do you know this guy? And they were looking for a flicker of recognition. They were reading names just to see a flicker of recognition. So what did he do? This amazing chassid, Rabbi Greenberg, he was reviewing Tanya by heart. And he closed his eyes. So they put him in a dark room, and they shone a light on him. They shouldn't be able to close his eyes, so he shouldn't be able to squint. And they wanted to see, and he tried to put himself in a different place, and he was busy reviewing Tanya in his head, so he shouldn't react to any of the names they say. And then he said one day they took him in chains and handcuffed, put him in a car across the street from the shul, and they had decoy people walking into the shul, and they had the real Hasidim walking into the shul. And they wanted to see if to be a flicker of recognition for any of these people. Right? This is what I mean by taking information out. That means a state of golus. State of golus means that you are now being abused. So when a yid doesn't behave properly, you know what happens? It's not just that he doesn't learn Torah and do mitzvahs. It's not just that he doesn't commit himself to living a holy life, a life of Yiddishkeit. What happens is that the extraneous forces extrapolate the energy of a yid, and they use that in a negative way. And that's why, over the last century, revolutions, massive changes, things which are antithetical to Judaism, including the latest of BDS. Who is it all run by? Who's it all fueled by? By Nebuch, wayward Jews. By Jews who have lost their way, by Jews who have disconnected themselves from Yiddishkeit. Of course BDS is all Jews. Who do you think it is? No. J Street. It's not fake Estonians. It's Jews who are running the whole thing. The people want to boycott, the harm Israel through boycotts and divestment. It's all Jews. But there's so many anti-Semites out there. So many people hate Israel. 70 of them are coming together in Paris now just to condemn us. And yet, it's all fueled by Jews. It's a crazy thing. But the thing is with the Yid has unbelievable power. So if his power is not harnessed right, he goes into a state of golus. Golus means he's being abused. He's being abused by himself. He's being abused by his own nefesh habahamis, his own animal soul, his own yetzer hara. But he's not harmless. Then he becomes much more harmful because of his great power. Understand? The Yid is a powerful thing. you have to harness him right. Otherwise you have grace etzaros. And this is the point, that this is the concept of the Soid Golus HaShechina. There's this mystery. It's a mystery. We don't really understand it. How is it possible for God to be in Golus? God controls everything. How could God be in Golus? So how did some people solve this mystery? They solved the mystery. God is not here. They said, God is gone. Where's God? They killed him in Auschwitz. They said, he was burned in the ovens. He doesn't exist here. This is a godless place. But that doesn't fit with the theology of Judaism. Doesn't fit. Why do bad things happen to good people? I'll tell you why. God's impotent. He's powerless. Feel bad for him. Cry for him too. Shkoyach. It's like Freudian psychology. Blame everything on your mother. But it doesn't help. But the guy says, but now you took my mother away from me. Oh, what do you need a mother for? Now you have no more pain. You had all this guilt. I took care of you, said the psychologist. You have no more guilt now. You can be free. So what did he do? The Yid was in pain. How could God do this to me? So what did the Chacham do? He said, don't worry. God didn't do it. God didn't do it. So now he's not angry at God. He lost his God. Then there's no God. If God is not in control, then there is no God. There's a famous conversation between a chassid and an atheist. And he said to him, I want you to know, he says, the God you don't believe in, I don't believe in either. I don't believe in that God. I believe in the God of Hashem Elokei Yisrael who controls everything. So how could it be? If God's in control, then how could it be Nazis and terrorists? How could it be? How does it work? We don't really know the answer to that question. By means of rationale and logic of Torah, it doesn't make sense. So how does it happen? It's a soid, it's a secret, it's a mystery. We can't figure this one out. But this is not just, it's very easy to project onto, the big panorama of issues out there. But really, this is inside here. This is going on within us. That's Soid Golus HaShechina. That's the energy and the forces that darken and harm holiness is us. We're the problem. The problem's not out there, the problem's in here. We have to deal with the problem. And we have to recognize that sometimes when we do things that are antithetical to Torah, that ultimately that's Golus HaShechina. That when we do this, we're breaking away from our source of life. This is why this ahava, which every Yid has it, even the biggest troublemaker, the biggest rebellious Jew has it, that this ahava, this love, this attraction, that its pull, its yearning is one directional. It wants to cleave to God. The source of all life. So it's called, and the name is Ahava Misuteres. The name is concealed. It doesn't say Ahava Ne'elama, the love which is hidden. We refer to it as the hidden love, but that's wrong. It's the concealed love. It's because if it's hidden love or just latent love or just potential love, it's not concealed. It's just unrevealed. Unrevealed is not concealed. What's the difference? A person may have amazing musical talent, but he grew up in a poor home and he didn't have proper schooling and he never had an option to get his hands on a musical instrument. He never knew he has musical talent. By some fluke chance, he's at the age of 14, somebody puts a piano in his hands, and a minute later he's playing. He's able to pick out a tune right away. Say, how did you do that? And it's got to come back. It takes time. Back. So he found that now he has talent. Out of the blue, he found that he has talent. Is that concealed talent? Somebody concealed it? Nobody concealed it. It was unknown. I always had it. I didn't know I had it. Then we have something called concealed. And that's the language used. Very strange. What language do we use? We use the language of concealed. We don't use the language of hidden. Because concealed means somebody hid something. It's like I wanted to bury a treasure. I hid it. I didn't want somebody else to see it. In other words, the neshama is not just that we have a potential neshama. We have a potential spiritual talent. And if only we would access that talent, wow, we could accomplish amazing things. But it's potential. It doesn't get actualized. What a tragedy. How sad would it be? Talk to a cultured person and tell him this is a musical genius. This person could work in a symphony. He would rise to the creme de la creme, the top of his industry. And say, it's killing me. And the kid is laying bricks. He's doing, it's terrible. This could have been academic. He could have been a scientist. He could have discovered a cure for cancer. Instead, he's mopping floors. He's not interested. Instead, he's throwing around the football. What a terrible loss. This guy could have been a hero, a sports hero. He could have been the star center. And instead, what is he doing? I don't know, whatever it is. So it's a tragedy. A loss for the world of sports, or science, or literature. How about the loss for Yiddishkeit? Science and literature and sports are here today, gone tomorrow. How about the Yid who is a tremendous neshama, and he could be on fire with holiness, and he could light up the whole world and make such a spiritual difference. And instead, he devoted his life to the pursuit of menial things, of things which are here today and gone tomorrow. So what a tragedy that is. Well, that, my dear friend, is the story of every one of us. Our unrealized potential. But the Alter Rebbe says that's not what it's called. It's called, in the parlance of Chassidus, Ava Misuteres. Now, the truth is, the Ava Misuteres, that terminology is actually biblical. It comes from a pasuk in Mishlei. In the 27th chapter of Mishlei, it says, Toiva techacha megula ma'ava Misuteres. It's better open criticism than hidden love. That's a Mishlei, a Proverbs, thing that... But the Ava Misuteres here is used, Alter Rebbe says, this is a marvelous concept. It's used pointedly. It is concealed. Somebody is concealing it. Who is concealing it? The Galus is concealing it. The Yetzer Hara, the Nefesh HaBahamis, the evil inclination, the animal soul is concealing it. It's being concealed. It's actively being dominated. It's a prisoner of war. It's being disabled. It's put into a state of dysfunction. It's not allowed to express itself. It's being fed non-kosher food, which is poison for it. It's being put in a non-kosher environment, which is deadening all of its nerve endings. It's a tragedy. This is the story of every one of us. You think you have to do big Avedas to be like a Russia? The Alter Rebbe says earlier, if a person is pursuing material things with a selfish intent, without any kind of holiness, that's also Mikri Russia. If you immerse yourself in klipas noiga, in the shell of light, but you're not looking at the light part of the shell, the dark part of the shell, you're in darkness. The good news is, if it's klipas noiga, you can turn it around still. But you're doing the wrong thing. If you're doing the wrong thing, you're in a state of darkness. So that means the Ava is becoming concealed. We have a desire to be close to God. We have a yearning for spirituality. We're concealing it. We're exiling it. Because it's misuteres umechusa. It's not just unrealized, it's not just undeveloped, it's not just unrevealed, it's concealed. It's actively concealed. Belevush sak, in what's metaphorized as a burlap sack of klipa and pesha Yisrael. And this is a big problem. It's a big problem. And because of this, because we're doing that, umimena nichnas behem ruach shtus lachtei. It's from this klipa that the spirit of folly and foolishness enters to cause us to sin. K'may merazal, like the saying of our sages, Ein Adam Choyte, a person doesn't sin unless a spirit of folly got into sin. Who invited the spirit of folly? Where did the spirit of folly come from? It came from us. It came from our own nefesh habahamis, because we let them in. Here's a piece of historical data which perfectly serves as a metaphor. How did the Romans come to occupy Israel? How did the Romans come to occupy? The Greeks occupied us. The Assyrian. We invited them. Two brothers were fighting. Aristobulus and Yochanan Hyrcanus were fighting. The two Jews are fighting. Two Jewish brothers. Two Maccabee descendants from the Hasmonean family. Came from great Kohanim, from amazing people. And now they got into a fight with each other. And each one was vying for power. This is all about klipa v'sitrachra, ego, the polar opposite of holiness. And one was foolish enough to think that if he'll invite the Romans, who were the new nascent empire, he'll invite them in, then he'll be able to beat his brother. The Romans are only too happy. So you need help? Sure, we'll help you. Thanks for giving us a finger. From a finger, they got a foot in the door. Before you knew it, the Romans had dominated and conquered Israel without firing a single bow, a single arrow. And then, of course, by the time we realized what was going on, we rebelled, but then it was too late. So this is the story that happens with every one of us. How did the Romans get in? How did this Ruach Shtus come from? We invited him in, that's why. You wanted to do the wrong thing. You didn't want to feel guilty. Enough with this conscience, this Jewish genetic disease from my mother that I have to feel guilty every time I do the wrong thing. Enough of that. Let me lock out the conscience. Let me lock it. I want to just enjoy life. I want to just be myself. I want to express myself and do what I want to do. Not what the rabbi told me to do, and the Rebbetzin told me to do, and the Torah told me to do, and my grandmother told me to do. I want to be me. And all kinds of other selfish expressions and self-aggrandizement and self and the I and I and I. And because of all this narishkeit, eventually we invite the Romans in. And that's how the Ruach Shtus comes in. And the Ruach Shtus tells you it doesn't matter. You're just as Jewish. Doesn't matter if you eat pork. Doesn't matter if you have cheeseburgers. Doesn't matter if you're married, not Jewish. Don't matter. Nothing matters. You're a beautiful Jew. God loves you anyway. And before you know it, you're in a state of total disconnect. A state of total apathy. And a state of total removal until, and this is the good news, the walking dead can come back to life in a moment. Until there's that moment. And when that moment comes, that suddenly the nuclear essence is laid bare, the Pintel Yid is revealed, all of a sudden he comes back to life. But please do not wait to be shocked by paddles. Live a life. Live a life. That's what we're learning Chassidus. That we shouldn't wait, chas v'shalom, for an Nisayan, for something to wake us up. And instead, we should be alive, awake, and Jewish, and living the way the Eibishter, the way Almighty God wants us to, realizing our spiritual potential each and every day of our life here, Alei Adamis, and then we are connected to true life. The true life, which is far beyond the reality of flesh and plasma, of bone and blood, the reality that's here today and gone tomorrow. And that, my dear friends, concludes our class for today.